The Britain Potential, a politics inspired by a new stage of human consciousness, by Jim Cowan, published by Arena Books. Chapter 1 is available in print form, if you'd like to read it, from the book's website, The Britain Potential, all one word, .co.uk. And here is Chapter 1 in audio form. Chapter 1 is Potential and Consciousness. We are not problems waiting to be solved, but potential waiting to unfold. Potential is a wonderful way we look to the future in daily life. We want to encourage children and young people to realize their potential. We want to fulfill our own. But we also talk about potential in a broader way. As I was writing this book, I came across what felt like countless people in all walks of life asking me what the book was about. When I said that I thought Britain had the most enormous potential, but that it wasn't being fully realized by a long way, everyone agreed. It was as if I put into words something they'd been feeling, but had never expressed clearly to themselves. What did all these people have in their minds? It could have been a vaguely felt mismatch between how life ought to be and how it actually is. Wendy Brown has found herself expressing it like this: a ubiquitous, if unavowed, exhaustion and despair in Western civilization. Most of us have ceased to believe in the human capacity to craft and sustain a world that is humane, free, sustainable, and above all, modestly under human control. Is this a cry for a shift of consciousness? Potential is most often talked about in relation to an individual, but it's also used to talk about collectivities like a country, an organization, or a community. It can be about internal feelings and understandings, as well as observable evidence in the external world. This gives us 4 quadrants. Down the left-hand side are individual and collective, but across the top are internal and external. So in the individual internal box, or quadrant, it says, realizing potential through how I feel about myself and my perspective on life. In the individual external quadrant, it says, realizing potential through my behavior and how others see me. And in the collective internal quadrant, it says, realizing potential through my relationships with family, friends, communities, organizations I'm part of. And in the collective external quadrant, it says, realizing potential through organizations, institutions, and systems that I interact with. What these 4 quadrants give this book is a focus on the people potential, moving back and forth between individuals and the country, both objectively and from within. I think this gives us a really fluid, very human and dynamic way to look at Britain and explore whether indeed it really is fulfilling its potential. When you factor in shifts of consciousness, the 4 quadrants become a truly impressive tool helping to synthesize and get an overall view of otherwise baffling and complex realities. This tool comes from the work of Ken Wilber. By exploring Britain and its potential through this integrated, or as Wilber calls it, this integral lens, I think we get to understand the Britain potential afresh. I hope it feels like waking up. In this book, along with learning to value ourselves and what kind of consciousness we have, I'm focusing on support from others as a practical necessity in realizing potential. While it may be that it is us reading, learning, training, being coached, finding something we're good at, overcoming a weakness, being inspired by someone, we probably come to do this through someone else. I call this the ecology of support that uniquely is within us and surrounds each of us. For us to be realizing our own potential, I think that living ecology of support is very important. I would now like to unpack the basic building blocks of that ecology, starting with the self, then family and friends, then networks and communities, then organizations, and last, but by no means least, the country's politics. Starting with the self. How do we realize potential? Some of it is internal and some of it is external. Some we do by ourselves, some we do with others. We may feel trapped or imprisoned by our circumstances. Feeling stuck can be the catalyst for tapping into our inner reservoir and resourcefulness in some new way. Whether we value ourselves plays a big part in feeling able to fill in the application form, go for the interview, ring someone up we've never met. Realizing potential can depend on information, inspiration, or person-to-person support. I'm struck by these words. We don't live well or fully if we cannot share our thoughts and feelings with others. Inquiry, examination, and collaboration are central to this sharing. Our relationships with others really matter in living fully. However, that relationship may not be through words. I know one community activist who befriended someone suicidal in a residential home. She visited him frequently. He, in turn, laid down the ground rules. Nothing simplistic. In fact, he ignored all her words until she heard him talking about Vaughan Williams' music. She went away, listened to the pieces, and began to realize that he was sharing how he was feeling and also how he wanted to be inspired to feel. Music did it for him, not words. I also heard about the horse course. These are stables with horses that are trained to work with humans. The horse will not come near a human in pain, full of fear or anxiety, but they will respond to directions from that same human when they calm down. These stables have treated large numbers of young offenders for whom talking therapies had not worked. The interaction with the horse tapped into the bodily response and bypassed the thinking mind. It allowed the human to learn to de-escalate or wind down the fear and anxiety so they could do this back home with other humans. Naturally, this opens far more possibilities for realizing potential. Here are two stories of people who realized far more of their potential. My own, and a young woman I read about. I stopped drinking alcohol. I gave it up altogether in 1996. The years since then have been like living without the brake permanently on. I've had so much more energy. What I discovered is that the alcohol was not the issue. The issue was me holding back a part of myself because of being emotionally bruised in my childhood and holding up a metaphorical screen inside myself to stop people seeing the mess inside. To say that I had no idea what it really meant to value myself is an understatement. These enormous internal pressures found release in alcohol, which I would sometimes drink to excess. Not needing to do this anymore has meant I'm fulfilling much more of my potential. I really do have a sense of the value of my life. This means my quality of life has shot up. I build better relationships with others. From a holistic viewpoint, I'm much more a whole person. I feel much freer. The point at which I changed was a point of insight into what was driving me to drink too much. It was an intense engagement with myself. I found myself understanding my younger self from a completely different standpoint. I literally was back at the time as a young boy when that emotional bruising took place, realizing what I did to protect myself. I remembered that I had decided to hold back a part of myself I was never going to share with anyone else. If such important people as your father can be taken away from you, what can you rely on? As I was having this realization about what I did, accompanying it was the realization that I was, at that very time, able to no longer be controlled by this. The internal itch or cause of the drinking went, resulting in no alcohol since that day. This was a profound shift of consciousness, with literally transformational consequences. Here is an experience from a young woman which seems to me both to speak to the times we live in and illustrate what it could be like to live more of one's potential. By the time she was 14, she was suffering from depression, brought on by being bullied at school from the age of 5. The death of her granddad had added to the depression. She was diagnosed as bipolar and had tried various medications and therapies. Nothing seemed to reach her. By the time she was 16, she wanted to end her life on a daily basis. But encountering a supportive network and starting to practice, things began to look like they were improving. It was a long process, and I wasn't sure what happiness felt like. When I read this, I wondered how many young women in Britain this last line speaks to. It felt like someone was stabbing me in my heart. I wasn't sure what happiness felt like. Starting from a very crude state of self-awareness, over several years she evolved into someone with a complex and more dynamic consciousness. So much so that she writes, "My approach to my depression has now changed. Instead of feeling sorry for myself, I see it as a challenge to really transform my life and the life of my family on a deeper level. My episodes now only last a very short time, as I refuse to be defeated anymore. I can now say, for the first time, that I truly love and respect my life. I'm able to see the beauty of my life. At the age of 16, I would have never believed that I would still be alive today, let alone feel happy. My heart has changed, and the impossible has become possible." Beside the text of this experience was a picture of her getting married. Patently, this young woman now has better relationships with others. Her quality of life is incomparably better, and she's become whole in some way that was impossible before. From these examples, it's clear that valuing ourselves, our consciousness, and the support of others are all important to realizing potential. Some of the freedoms in Britain include the press, expression, association, speech, thought, and belief. But I detect a lot of people seeking another freedom, existential freedom, or being able to become the person I can be. By existential freedom, I mean feeling free to respond to deeper yearnings with the time-honored qualification of not harming others. Living true to ourselves moves us towards realizing our potential as individuals. Some people literally build new lives. We also need material support, especially enough money, to live existential freedoms. Can you really make the kind of changes towards becoming the person you know you could be if you're in poverty, homeless, addicted, in poor health, or have had your benefit cut off or sanctioned? While it may not be impossible in theory, surely it's impossible in reality. These examples made me think of this passage from Parker Palmer. If you hold your knowledge of self and world wholeheartedly, your heart will at times get broken by loss, failure, defeat, betrayal, or death. What happens next in you and the world around you depends on how your heart breaks. If it breaks apart into 1,000 pieces, the result may be anger, depression, and disengagement. If it breaks open into greater capacity to hold the complexities and contradictions of human experience, the result may be a new life. The circumstances of too many people in Britain are such that their hearts break apart. Having one of the world's largest economies does not address this. The Britain potential is a vision of a Britain where, if hearts break, they break open because people are coming from a stronger sense of their self-worth, a consciousness which enables them to do this, and that priceless and very practical personal ecology of support is there. The positive upward spiral through self-development is self-fueling. As we establish our personal integrity through, in part, winning over the challenges to bring potential to fulfillment, we experience a greater wholeness. We find ourselves drawing more and more on positive resources in daily life, and we move toward autonomy. Autonomy is about learning to govern our own lives so that the autonomy of others is respected. We can't do this without the help of others. Richard Dagger expresses the journey to establish autonomy well. This ability grows out of our needs and desires, our talents and limitations, and the opportunities and obstacles in the world around us. No one can develop this ability without the help of others. We need the assistance of family and friends, neighbours, teachers, workmates and others. But I think Richard Dagger's key point is that once we've achieved autonomy, we no longer rely on others to remain autonomous. In fact, we can support others to become autonomous. This is a self-fueling, positive, upward spiral of ongoing becoming. I want to turn now to the collective quadrants. Family and friends. How wonderful if you feel you're moving forward in your life and you have the support of your family as well as your friends. It's an ideal. How many find themselves at odds with some or all of their family members precisely because they are being the person they can be? Thankfully gone are the days when it was just assumed that 2 biological parents are necessary. Single parents have raised children to become mature, independent, happy and capable adults. Some 2-parent biological families have proved toxic for their young people. Children can come through surrogates. Same-sex marriages can provide great families for children and young people. Today, there are complexities of step relationships to navigate. Our repertoire of how the family can be is evolving. Any of these diverse arrangements could be toxic or profoundly nurturing. Today, there are enormous possibilities and complexities in these combinations of family and friend relationships. And for some, there is no family, and there may be no friends. For some, it's neighbours or networks, the community or the internet that prevent them being completely on their own. Government has invented a new category of family, those that are just managing. In 2017, the Centre for Social Justice estimated the cost of family breakdown to be $47 billion. The family is, after all, crucial to the well-being of the whole society. The levels of loneliness, homelessness, suicide, domestic violence, and divorce do suggest that there are circumstances where support for the family is needed. This will be explored further in Chapter 3. Networks and community. There is a substantial body of research about the power of supportive and positive networks. In January 2009, the New Scientist reported on research by Nicholas Christakis, a medical sociologist at Harvard Medical School. He found that happiness tends to be spread through social contacts over time. Someone's chances of being happy increase the better connected they are to happy people. Peter Totterdell at the University of Sheffield found the happiness of nurses, office workers and players in professional sports teams very much depended on the happiness of the others in the same group. Emotional displays by bank employees had a direct impact on the mood of their customers. Juliet Wakefield of Nottingham Trent University, in a study of 4,000 people, found that individuals who feel a strong sense of belonging to social groups are much happier people. There is a stronger sense of purpose and security, as well as crucial social support during times of stress and crisis. It's that subjective sense of belonging that's crucial for happiness. You may be part of a group growing vegetables sustainably in an urban area. You lose your partner to cancer, and it's the urban farm group who help you through the nightmare. Youth, surely, of all the generations, is most about potential. Youth always needs role models and networks around them which teach positive values and foster genuine friendships. We need to reflect on this research on networks with the challenges facing our urban youth in mind. Today, Britain hardly has a youth service left. The young woman's experience above really shows how crucial a network or community of positive support can be in breaking through in one's life. The psychological desire to be part of something worthwhile together with others is very fundamental to human beings. We are hardwired for community. Its opposite, loneliness and the pain of involuntary isolation, is strongly associated with depression, paranoia, anxiety, insomnia, and fear. Being part of something worthwhile with others can be a powerful route to becoming more of the person you can be. Here is the voice of someone I worked with in my community development work, who began to fulfill much more of her potential through becoming involved with her community. I've changed an awful lot personally. You get into the thing of being a housewife and a mum. I'm sure there's an awful lot of people like me. You just don't think about anything. You do things automatically. You stop functioning. When I became involved, I realized there was something else outside the house. Then I just got interested and explored a lot of things. It opened my eyes. I realized when I was exploring that counsellors and officers do have an effect. They have an involvement in my life outside of me and the situation I was in. All those influences have a direct effect. I just never thought about it. It's a very gradual process. The realization or knowing I could actually do something else. I was a person in my own right and not only somebody's wife or somebody's mother. I could write a letter to a counsellor. I could get a group of women together. The research published by Local Trust in 2018 on the future for communities found that some communities need support. Poverty, fragmentation, transience, isolation, when they come together, say on an estate, mean that community is unlikely to become self-organizing without the right kind of support. I explore more about networks and communities in Chapter 4. Organizations. For Britain to do better at fulfilling its potential, the organizations across the country of all kinds need to be working well. Just imagine if the 1.5+ million organizations across the country were working really well. Sadly, they don't all work well. Companies get it wrong. Civil society organizations can too. But it's the public services where I think the greatest problems lie in terms of Britain fulfilling far more of its potential. I examine this in Chapter 8. Here is Frederick Laloux's take on organizations today. We are increasingly disillusioned by organizational life. For people who toil away at the bottom of the pyramids, surveys consistently report that work, more often than not, is dread and drudgery, not passion or purpose. Life at the top of pyramids isn't much more fulfilling. Behind the facade, the lives of powerful corporate leaders are ones of quiet suffering too. Their frantic activity is often a poor cover-up for a deep sense of emptiness. The power games, the politics and the infighting end up taking their toll on everybody. At both the top and the bottom, organizations are more often than not playfields for unfulfilling pursuits of our egos, inhospitable to the deeper yearnings of our souls. Many organizations are completely stuck, have poor leadership, and actually are extremely ineffective at what they're supposed to be doing. There is enormous alienation here. In some industries, we have people cutting corners, making the organization dangerous. And there are just too many poorly run organizations, frustrating the people working in them. With organizations in Britain, there's a great deal of frustrating of potential. I examine the next generation of organizations in Chapter 5. Politics. What does politics have to do with each of us realizing potential? As the woman in the quote earlier said, I've realized when I was exploring that counsellors and officers do have an effect. Politics sets a framework within which the country functions. The government of the day brings a specific consciousness which binds the people enacting that politics together. Their values spread around the society. The political story of the day impacts on us. George Monbiot, presenting the ideas in his book Out of the Wreckage, said, "The poor blame themselves. It's your fault if you're obese, unemployed, or run into debt." Politics has a bearing on how some people value themselves and how well the ecology of support is working. Day to day, we see a politics of firefighting on the surface of things, there is, to say the least, widespread distrust of the political system and those who people it. There's a pervasive sense of politicians not working in the interests of the ordinary man and woman. In 2017, the New Economic Foundation found that 8 in 10 people think that they have little or no power over decisions made by government, councils, or local services. Voters believe they have extremely limited influence over the key institutions of the country. The formation of parties to rival the two main ones has done nothing to alter this sense of powerlessness. There are strengths in our politics. The constituency work of MPs has an open-door policy. Anyone can approach an MP in their constituency, fatally exploited in the case of Joe Cox. It is a very positive, taken for granted part of today's Britain that there are freedoms of the press, expression, association, speech, thought, and belief. Moreover, there is the rule of law. Of course, informed people will want to qualify each of these. But the fact is, we're nowhere near being merely majoritarian, in which there is no free speech and the rule of law is shaky. We definitely are a democracy, but one that could do with some serious further development. The current political culture is not very attractive. It's one of aggression, self-absorption, and refusal to reach out beyond its own arguments. It's one of increasing polarization. It does not help that politicians seem to be able to get away with outright lies and not be in the least accountable. For example, we will ensure nobody is homeless. The MP's expenses scandal reinforced a sense that this representative system is no longer adequate. Around half had no link to their constituency before they became an MP. You do sense there may be 1 or 2 conflicts of interest. Britain today is a complex place. How can politicians, without having their feet properly on the ground, actually know what it is like in Britain? And if there are politicians who do know what it is like, how good will they be at actually getting the right things done? What are the right things? No one seems to know anymore. And this is possibly one of the factors pulling people back from any real belief in the ability of politicians to make the really substantial changes that are needed. The dominant political consciousness does not recognize the inner lives of people. There is nothing particularly supportive of the spiritual dimensions of life coming through our politics. We do not yet have a politics in Britain designed to support individuals, families, networks, communities, and organizations to realize potential. People are looking for a new dimension in politics, which I discuss in Chapter 6. Moving on to consciousness. How am I defining consciousness? I'm not talking about the actual mechanics whereby brain matter generates consciousness. This is the stuff of cognitive and neuroscience. I'm not trying to connect potential with what consciousness in itself is. Rather, I'm talking about what colors and creates very specific states of awareness of oneself in relation to the world. There's no question that Stone Age man and woman had very different consciousnesses compared with ourselves. In the Stone Age, magic and kinship colored the prevailing consciousness. If by today we take the kind of rational outlook created by the Enlightenment, then science, technology, and the complexities of interpersonal relatedness, way beyond just kinship, color the consciousness. In this use of the word consciousness, all 4 quadrants are engaged in an outlook particular to that stage in human development. Here, consciousness is about the social, cultural, and political, as well as personal and collective identity. For example, there are contexts in which large numbers of people share a specific type of consciousness. This can involve the followers of a religion, a political party, or people working in a corporation. Your consciousness shapes your stance within the world around you. It gives meaning to living, and in this book, Consciousness is what connects individuals realizing potential and the country or any collectivities within it realizing potential. I'm arguing that changing our consciousness is the most powerful way to realize more of our own potential. As well as more of us do this, the country better realizes potential. Has anyone developed a way of looking at this very experiential approach to consciousness? Quite a few people have. Here I'm going to focus on the colour-coded way of talking about consciousnesses that I've already touched on by Ken Wilber and others. There are indeed higher and lower, or more or less evolved and aware, structures of consciousness, and that we, as individuals and societies, can grow to higher levels in progressive stages or waves of development. The merit of drawing on Wilber's definition is it provides a shorthand way to talk about consciousnesses that is fairly well known. It also connects with history and gives insight into why things in the world have developed as they have. I'll be using these colours, so readers will need to become familiar with what each colour stands for. To help, here's a chart below, and subsequent chapters explain these consciousnesses through stories, making the differences between them much clearer. Much of the book is focusing on just two, orange and teal. The table shows, down the left-hand side, red, amber, orange, green and teal. And across the top, horizontally, there's a description of each, examples, their strengths and their weaknesses. So we'll start with red, a red consciousness, described as egocentric, the leadership of the strong. Examples, mafia, prisons, combat zones. Strengths, can spot opportunities and respond to threats ruthlessly. Weaknesses, planning, developing a strategy. Amber consciousness, and its description, ethnocentric leadership from rules. Examples, organized religion, agriculture, institutions, bureaucracies. Strengths, stable, enduring, covers a large area. Weaknesses, strict norms, inequality, controlling. The orange consciousness, description, world-centric leadership from reason. Examples, science, technology, business. Strengths, universal approaches, questioning dogma, responsive to change. Weaknesses, materialistic, disconnected from inner life. Green consciousness, description, pluralistic, non-directive leadership. Examples, civil rights, environmental activism, feminism. Strengths, holistic problem finding. Weaknesses, endless search for consensus. Teal consciousness, description, integral, humanistic leadership. Examples, self-organizing autonomous teams. Strengths, holistic problem solving. Weaknesses, takes effort to develop, in the minority. Before we explore these colours, we need to appreciate that they show the progress humanity has made, from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to pluralistic to humanistic. There is a subtlety about that progression. Each movement forward rings truer. What has gone before has become problematic. We need to bear in mind that once a consciousness becomes embedded in a particular culture, country, population and time, its centre of gravity or fundamental point may not be so evident. It's become the prevailing way of thinking or the norm. Norms are not easy to see when you're in them and living them. What Wilber's colour coding enables us to do is break out of being submerged within a norm we were not aware of being in. I'm going to start with red, power. These are wolf packs. Red is about the leadership of the strong. It is very ego-centered consciousness. With red, we have someone at the centre and foot soldiers and slaves doing the dirty work. Rewards and punishments are understood. You submit to a warlord in return for protection. With red, think mafia, inner city gangs, combat zones, civil wars, and prisons. These are ways of being organized are not great at planning or developing strategy, but they can spot opportunities and respond to threats ruthlessly. The movement on from red is amber. It is stable because of its rules. We are entering the world of organized religion, agriculture, states, institutions, bureaucracies, and the military. Everyone has a proper place. There is more awareness, than with red, of others' feelings and perceptions, but it is ethnocentric. You are with us or against us. For amber religion, there is just one true way. Amber society is about simple morals based on a right way of doing things. Amber is about order, stability, and predictability. There is inequality and strict norms holding that inequality in place. Control is exercised through hierarchies. Amber organizations, such as came into being with the formation of the welfare state, can operate across huge geographical areas. They can scale. They are not only stable, they endure. Amber may be fine for stable contexts, but once there is turbulence, the ability to continually reappraise and, if necessary, change course is needed. Breaking out of the straitjacket of amber, humanity has moved on to orange. This can create goals and plans that can shift as circumstances change. This is the great use of reason. It is modernity as progress, success, achievement, and unlimited wealth creation. Set alongside this are ideals for justice, equality, and freedom. Whereas amber was ethnocentric, orange is world-centric. It wants what is best for everyone. It wants universal approaches. Orange investigates and harnesses nature's laws for human benefit. The scientific method and continual development of technology is so orange. So too is entrepreneurship. Standards of living continually improve. So too does the reckless exploitation of resources. And very crucially for Britain and its culture, the subjective realm is fundamentally set apart from the objective realm. Orange can't connect with people's inner lives and instead focuses on observable behavior. With orange, authority, norms, rules, and traditions can all be questioned. Religious and political dogma can be questioned without the questioners being imprisoned, but this questioning has its limits. New little ambers also get created like private schools, privileged neighbourhoods, and exclusive clubs. This worldview is materialistic and suspicious of spirituality. With orange, think machines. Think the mainstream consciousness in Britain today. Amber and orange think that they are the right way to view and do things. A Britain dominated by amber and orange in the 60s gave birth to the next consciousness, green. This consciousness is currently the leading edge. In the 60s, the freedom to question authority reached new heights. This consciousness rejected so much emphasis on reason. Green does not like the materialistic nature of orange. Green seeks fairness, equality, harmony, community, cooperation, and consensus. Everything is interconnected. Think holistic. Greens are seeking close, harmonious bonds. The positive side of green is that it has powered civil rights in America, the worldwide environmental movement, and feminism. While a strength of green is to see what needs to change, how to achieve this, and what path needs to be taken is not so clear. Thus the search for consensus can be endless, and although green rejects amber and orange, at the very same time, all perspectives deserve respect. There's not enough going on within a green consciousness to bring different perspectives together. In fact, an absolutist tendency in green will prevent perspectives being heard. Green actually is not really a departure from the type of consciousness that has preceded it. Green still thinks it's the correct way to see the world, just like amber and orange. A world in which just had amber and orange has now become a world with amber, orange, and green. The tendency to polarization has increased. Along with these factors, Wilber argues postmodernism has also contributed to the inability of people with a green consciousness to take up leadership positions effectively across society. Where postmodern thinking arrives at a position of there is no truth, to the extent that this filters into green consciousness, it undermines people taking on leadership. Wilber sees green as a badly tilted consciousness in need of greater clarity about making it work positively. But there is a next colour. This is the consciousness we're moving into, and Wilbur calls it teal. There is trust in the abundance of life in the universe with teal. Teal is more than world-centric. It is able to act on cosmic truths. The ego is not in the driving seat. There is a quest for wholeness, bringing together the ego and deeper parts of the self. A more expansive, embracing self is there. Teal is not fearful and needing to control. Problems become challenges. How can we grow from engaging with this problem? There is a healthy development of self and concern and interest in others. Teals develop themselves inwardly, spiritually, but they are able to connect this with complex realities. Life is always teaching us about ourselves and the world. Teal has thinking and rationality. Teal has doing. And it also has being the person I can be. Teal will tap into all kinds of knowing, from analytics to the wisdom to be found through emotion and intuition. With Teal, there is great leadership, but because it's based on self-organizing with this breadth of life, it becomes the most inclusive leadership of any of the consciousnesses. There is a real sense of everything being deeply connected in a living universe. We are working together with others to find a deeper place to come from, where we can become these more fulfilled people. Think life itself. Earlier, I said that changing consciousness is the most important part of realizing potential. Wilbur characterizes Teal as a significant quantum leap for humanity. It is of a different order of consciousness compared with those preceding it. What distinguishes Teal is an overwhelming sense of the underlying unity of humanity. The workings of life bear equally on everyone and everything in Teal. Thus diversity, through Teal, gains a unifying framework within which the strengths of green, orange and amber can begin to work together within a shared larger whole. Unlike green, for Teal, not all views are equal. Some views are more true. Depth exists. Teal is able to see the limitations of previous consciousnesses and their strengths. Teal has the ability to develop a unifying culture in which people with other consciousnesses can work. Laloux's researches show Teal leadership at work in organizations going back 10, 20, and 30 years. So even though Teal is being portrayed as the next consciousness, actually Teal has been around for some time, as we will see. Wilbur's profiling is of a society like Britain having a majority in the population with amber orange, and maybe a quarter with green, and possibly 5% Teal. Teal and green are not the majority. In a democracy, that might seem to stop the realization of potential beyond what is being realized now. But we will see in the course of the book that this is just not so. Teal has impact far greater than numbers in the population. Teal is the highest expression of consciousness that we know today that is workable within society on a mass scale. Mapping potential and consciousness. You can map your own ecology of support for realizing potential together with the consciousnesses using a self-diagnostic chart. You might be able to see new ways forward. We can use the example of the young woman earlier in this chapter. Let us call her Susie, and that the bullying, etc., was all around the red consciousness. Her way forward was not, initially, coming from family and friends, but from a very Teal community who supported her over a lengthy period to move through stages of internal growth until a Teal Susie emerged. In fact, that community offered an organizational framework in which she could play an active part. The community and its organization enabled her to make a very big change in her consciousness towards Teal. There can be enormous power in a committed individual working intensively on themselves, while at the same time being part of a community in which very rapid internal development is being supported. With this one example, readers can hopefully get a sense of how to use this tool. Other examples might be Joe, with a red consciousness, who hates being in an amber organization, or it might be Alice, who has developed a green consciousness but feels marginalised, misunderstood, and just not taken seriously in an orange family? What parts of their ecology of support might offer them a way forward? The use of this tool will really become more beneficial when it's part of a personal developmental process shared with others, where the rich realities of life can be talked through. With the teal consciousness, I think there are many more than 5% in Britain. Many have been beavering away on their own. I think there are many people who have actually had a teal consciousness, but have just not yet named it. So when you map your ecology of support against consciousnesses, you will no doubt be asking yourself whether you are teal. Is this the first time you've named it? Do you know of teal in your ecology of support? Do they know that they are teal? Teal gives us a start point for this book. Is teal the consciousness that will mean Britain realising its potential? But first, let us get to grips with Orange Britain. That's the end of chapter 1.